Hello and good morning. Welcome, friends, visitors, and guests to Thomas Jefferson Unitarian Church. Welcome to our socially distanced, spiritually together Sunday service. We extend a special welcome if you are questioning, confused, seeking, lost, or discerning. And we especially welcome you if you all in your wonderfully human gifts and imperfections. Wherever you come from, wherever you are, and wherever you might be going, you are welcome here. Please join us after the service today for coffee and conversation. That'll be done by Zoom in our little breakout groups. And for folks who want to be more engaged during the week as we navigate during quarantine, there are some digital options to help you keep in touch. I'll put some links in chat in a little while on these, but visitors should go to the TJ page, tjuc.org, and look at the Visit Us section for some more information there. And under the community banner at the top, you can find links to the Zoom gatherings during the week. Coffee chat happens at 9 a.m. Every morning, Monday through Thursday, and happy hour is every Friday at 5. I hope y'all can join us. Cheers.
Our chalice lighting ritual is meant to remind us of the beloved community we create together, a community founded on respect and justice for all. If you have a candle or a chalice handy, wherever you are, please light it as we read our chalice lighting words together. Children and youth in your homes are warmly invited to act as chalice lighters today. We say together, take from life its coals, not its ashes. Fan the flames of love and justice. Join hands and hearts in common endeavor, and there will be no limit to what we can achieve together.
The opening words this morning are by W.E.B. Du Bois. The prayer of our souls is a prayer for persistence, not persistence with one great deed or one noble thought, but deed after deed and thought after thought, until through persistence we have created a life of purpose.
We're living in a time when lots of things seem uncertain and maybe even scary. There's so much to learn about and so much to make sure that our children understand. Our story today is meant to help families begin important conversations about the protest movement happening all around the nation. The story begins with two children sleeping peacefully. Suddenly, the children wake up in the middle of the night. There are loud noises happening from right outside their bedroom window in their apartment in an inner-city neighborhood. The little boy asked his sister, "What is that noise?" "I don't know. It sounds like someone is fighting." Their father came in quickly to reassure them. "Did the noise wake you? You two go back to sleep. Everything is okay, and you're safe. We'll talk about it in the morning." And so the children settled down and finally fell back asleep. "Are the kids okay?" the children's mother asked as their father came into the room. "Yes, Kim." "Brandon, I've never seen it like this before. I remember growing up in Alabama as a child, hearing the same noises outside my window. It was a very scary time, and so is this." Morning came to find the family gathering for breakfast. "Did everyone sleep well?" Dad asked. "No, there was a lot of noise outside." "Dad, who was making all that noise?" "Samantha, the community was protesting." "Daddy, what is protesting?" "Let's go to the computer and learn about that." And so the family gathered in front of their computer and looked at a picture on the screen. Is this a protest, Mom? Yes, Samantha, this is a picture taken in 1963 of the March on Washington. That's where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Then Dad pulled out an old photo album. You see this picture? That was me at the Million Man March in 1995. Was that a protest too, Daddy? Yes, Corey, but it was a different kind of protest, Mom began. A protest is when people express a disagreement by words or by actions. That's right, Dad added. People do that when they want to support an issue they care about or want to change. Dad, can kids protest? Yes, son. Kids have always been a part of protests. So, how can we protest? Well, Samantha, there are different kinds of protests. There are boycotts, marches, silent sit-ins, petitions, letter writing, and civil disobedience. Civil what is that? Well, that's some of what you heard last night. Our community is frustrated and angry by the way some police officers are treating people in our community. Some people have decided to protest by doing things that challenge unfair laws, rules, or actions. Corey, do you remember the time I took your toy truck for not doing your chores? You remember what you did? You folded your arms, stomped away, and pouted. Well, that was a form of protesting something you didn't like. Let's get ready for school now. Your bus is coming soon. Do you two understand protesting a little better now? Yes, Mom, I think we do. Hey, Dad, I got a question. Yes, son, what is it? Can we protest going to school today? How about I protest your allowance? Never mind. And so the children climbed on their bus, and Dad waved and said hopefully, "Have a great and safe day." It's so important to have good conversations like the family in our story did, and give honest answers to questions that children ask. Maybe this story today will prompt some conversations in your family too. Take care.
Though our church building is closed, our church activities continue, just in another form. Those continuing activities, of course, continue to need the financial support of all of you. At this time in our service, we invite you to consider a contribution. You can make that contribution through a donation button on the church website. And some special music. From Carl Sandburg. In the darkness, with a great bundle of grief, the people march. In the night, and overhead a shovel of stars for keeps, the people march. Where to? What's next? It has been a hard several days to be a resident of Louisville. Though ours has not been the only city in turmoil, still, it's our city. And night after night, we watched, or joined, watched people outraged and grieving and confused and ashamed, gathering to protest actions that kept having different stories reported so that truth seemed to be shaped by anything but honesty and a desire for justice. Actions that had, again, meant people of color, our black neighbors, members of our community, were treated harshly, unfairly, killed, because after centuries they continue to bear the weight of our white society that is intent on keeping them down and out of the circle of compassion and equity. We were welcoming mild weather and the gradual reopening of our city. In short order, we ran back inside to live under a curfew and wonder when our lives might get a bit easier. And knowing that the distress unfolding on our city streets was testimony to lives among us that have never been the least bit easy. Being people of good hearts, valuing fairness, we wanted to do something to help, something to make a difference, something to relieve our own feelings of helplessness, maybe also feelings of guilt. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition and this particular church have proudly noted a long history of efforts to overturn racism. And yet, watching the pain in our city, it can seem that those efforts have not made one whit of difference. Alongside the protests happening here and around the country, two significant religious holidays were being marked. For Christians, last Sunday was Pentecost, the time when, according to tradition, the Spirit was given to the first followers of Jesus with the gift of multiple languages, thereby equipping them to spread their message beyond their own people and to other nationalities. This event is often interpreted as a time of coming together, when the Christian church was actually brought into existence. For Jews, the weekend marked the celebration of Shavuot, a harvest festival that also celebrates the time when the Torah, the Jewish teachings that define the Jewish people and their relationship to God, was given. The event, again, is a time of coming together as a religious community that knows itself to be a distinct community. Two holidays that share as a theme the theme of unity, being celebrated against the backdrop of protests and pain for the myriad ways in which in our civic lives we are far from being a community, far from being united, far from coming together with a common purpose. That juxtaposition seems ironic and telling. In another excruciating irony, the protests follow a time in our common life when we've been hearing the reassuring mantra, "We're all in this together," when we've been pulled together by the profound crisis of the pandemic. Many have discovered in this time new ways of connecting, so much so that another mantra of the pandemic has been, "We're all connected." Are we all connected? Are we in this together? Because the voices sounding from the protests carry quite a different message, attesting to the fact that we are thoroughly disconnected, that we live with deep fault lines between us that privilege a few at the expense of many, that perpetuates centuries of cruelty. The togetherness seems mostly true when all those who are together look and sound and live pretty much the same. We're in this together so long as we agree. We're in this together so long as we share the same race. We're connected to the extent that we enjoy the lifestyle of a white supremacy culture. Or we're connected to the extent that we suffer under the white supremacy culture. How do we make sense of these jarring differences? Where's the truth in Pentecost and Shavuot, in the pandemic reassurance of being together and connected, in the rage and pain of people who are long past weary of waiting for fairness, in the politicians who urge dominance and control as the best way forward, in the elected officials who call for healing without having first acknowledged the wrongness that caused the wounds. And as many of you have asked again and again these past many days, what do we do now? Several of you present this morning have read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, and this church recently offered a series of discussions of the book. It is a book that deserves more than one reading, a careful reading, a reading done in the spirit of curiosity and humility, because it is a book that upends many of the assumptions dear to the hearts of Unitarian Universalists in particular, and justice-loving white progressive people in general. For instance, DiAngelo takes aim at our love for individualism, how we honor as holy individual autonomy. That can seem to be a profoundly good thing, except it allows us to overlook the ways in which we are not all equal, we do not all start out equal, that it is not possible for any one of us to achieve anything if we only work hard enough. It allows us to believe that because I'm unique and I think for myself, that individually I can be exempt from the forces of racial socialization. Racism is not an attitude, it is not a belief, it is not a particular word or action by a bad person. Racism is a system, a structure built into our society so that it privileges white people above all others in myriad, constant ways. Holding fast to the holiness of individualism makes it possible for us to take comfort in saying things like, I treat all people as equal, or I don't see color, I see people. And with such statements, deny the stark realities of utterly different experiences between people of color and those who are white. Holding fast to the holiness of individualism makes it possible for us to tell ourselves that remaining neutral and non-judgmental when people of color suffer under the burden of a racist system is a sustainable position. Another of our beloved Unitarian Universalist tenets, one that has long been a favorite of mine, is the notion that intentions are what matters most. While looking at intentions will always be important, they cannot be considered apart from impact, perhaps most of all where racism is concerned. We have again and again sailed into situations involving the needs and pain of people of color with really good intentions, and succeeded in making things worse because we did not stop to examine what those intentions meant outside our own white frame of reference. Holding fast to the holiness of intentions makes it possible for us to continue enjoying the image of ourselves as saviors, the ones who will rescue people of color, and never see that when I'm your savior, I've placed myself in a position of superiority over you. When I'm bent on saving the day, and making sure everybody sees that I saved the day, I've made the situation all about me, my ego needs, my story. As we've asked ourselves repeatedly over the past many days, what can I do? I wonder whether we're asking with equal urgency, and just what is my motivation here? Say I do something, then what? Do I want to run tell somebody else? Do I consider myself satisfied? Can I check that off my list? We simply cannot go on as we have, safely assured that we're not racist in any way. We know what people of color need, namely, they need what we have, because what we have is best. And that we never turn the harsh light of accountability back on ourselves. Our hands are not clean, and they never have been. As D'Angelo puts it, the game is over. There's no face to save any longer. So rather than continuing to object that, hey, we're not the bad guys here, we do better to start owning up to our complicity. Because objecting and defending ourselves means that time and energy and resources are not being spent where they are most needed. We're all in this together. We're all connected. The pain and protests of the past week have shown the lie in those statements, and yet have also called us to see the truth in those statements. The lie is the easy commonality assumed in those statements, the erasing of the profound differences, the chasms of inequity that run through our racist society. Embracing that lie means we have no hope of healing. Oh, we may achieve a measure of quiet again, but that quiet is not the same as healing. For healing to even begin, we have to start with recognizing our privilege that comes to us moment by moment at the expense of people of color. We can't change inequity without first being able to see it in us, around us, woven throughout our lives. The truth in those statements, the truth that we're all in this together, that we're all connected, is the truth that the work needed to heal the wounds of racism and bring the beginnings of equity in society will be the work of every one of us, all of us doing it together. Nobody gets to sit out or play the victim or claim to have already done enough, given enough. Racism impacts all of us, diminishes all our lives. We are all connected in that pain. So if we're to have any hope of healing, we will have to be all in this together. To dismantle racist structures in our society, in our city, in our church, in our institutions, in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our hearts. Like it or not, we are all in this together. In the darkness, with a great bundle of grief, the people march. Back at the beginning of April, this congregation was proud to announce the hiring of the Reverend Dawn Cooley as our Justice Center coordinator. It was our plan at that time, because we figured the lockdown would soon be over, to have Reverend Dawn come to a service in the sanctuary so you could meet her in person and then speak, and then we'd applaud and we'd have a big party in Weston Hall afterwards. As that wonderful vision gets pushed farther and farther into the future, and especially watching where our community is now, it didn't make sense to keep Reverend Dawn on the shelf any longer. So I asked her if this morning she would speak to us. Here's the Reverend Dawn Cooley, your Justice Center coordinator now.
Thank you, Reverend Kathy, and it is a privilege to be serving you all in this capacity. Reverend Kathy, you packed so much in there. I hope that folks go back and listen to your words again. And I want to take as a leaping off point the point that last Sunday was Pentecost, the day when the apostles received the Spirit of God and were charged with going out into the world to share their message. Now, this may seem like a strange place to start for someone who is a humanist agnostic with pagan leanings, but bear with me. As Reverend Kathy said, the followers of Jesus were equipped with multiple languages. They didn't know how to speak a language, and then the fire came down and suddenly they did. Not too dissimilar from how the crew in the Matrix learns things by downloading them into their brains. But we know learning a language isn't really that easy. We know that it takes years of learning, of practice, of humility, and we make so many mistakes along the way. And even after we think we're fluent, there's still more to learn. I know I recently learned a few new vocabulary words in English, my native language. I'm still learning. But no one thinks that we are a bad person when we make mistakes while learning a language. Native speakers may cringe a bit, but they don't judge your very existence, even as they correct you. And yet, when it comes to white people learning the language of anti-racism, we seem to expect that we can learn it without making any mistakes. In White Fragility, the book, D'Angelo, the author, points out that we don't like to think of ourselves as bad people and that racists are bad people. And I, as a white person, am not a bad person, therefore I am not racist and I do not engage in racist behaviors. Part of what D'Angelo is urging white people to do is to make the shift away from understanding racism as a judgment on how good I am as a person, and towards a posture of humility. Understanding that as we practice being anti-racist, we will be learning and we will be failing. And it would be helpful to everyone if we learned to fail gracefully. D'Angelo tells a story. She writes, "In my workshops, I often ask people of color, how have you given white people feedback on our unaware yet inevitable racism? How often has that gone well for you? Eye rolling, head shaking, and outright laughter follow, along with the consensus of rarely, if ever. I then ask," she continues, "what would it be like if you could simply give us feedback, have us graciously receive it, reflect, and work to change the behavior?" Recently, a man of color sighed and said, "It would be revolutionary." It would be revolutionary if a white person got critique on their racism and received it with a, "Thank you, I understand, I will do better next time." Instead, it usually does not go well. We white people are generally pretty fragile. We want to be consoled. We want to be told we are not bad people. And usually we want a person of color to make us feel better. I cannot tell you how many white people I've heard after they read this book want to have their Black friend or coworker read it. Why? Usually, deep down, it is so that their Black friend or coworker will tell the white person that they aren't a bad person. If this was you, if you read this book and this was what you felt, don't feel bad. I'm not judging you. It's really very common. But let's look at what this does. This not only centers the need of a white person to feel like a good person, it actively causes harm to the person we are asking to console us. Let me say that again. It actively causes harm. For the people of color I know who have read this book, they describe it as a traumatic reliving and reminder of the big and small ways that they receive racism every day. And then to ask them to talk to us as white people about it, that puts many people of color in a no-win situation. They can either be truthful with us, in which case they risk the relationship, or maybe even their job or their livelihood. Or they can lie and tell us what we want to hear and minimize their own experience of our racist behaviors. White people cannot expect Black people to be propping up our feelings. This is another characteristic of the culture of white supremacy that we live in. My need for consolation outweighs the rights of a Black person to not have to experience emotional trauma. D'Angelo continues her story. She says, I ask my fellow whites to consider the profundity of that response. It would be revolutionary if we could receive, reflect, and work to change the behavior. On the one hand, the man's response points out to how difficult and fragile we are, she writes. But on the other hand, it indicates how simple it can be to take responsibility for our racism. Simple, but not easy. Those of us white people intentionally working on the language of anti-racism keep learning and we keep making mistakes. As we become more fluent, the more we truly understand it's not about us as good or bad people, it's about learning a language. D'Angelo concludes her passage. She writes, we aren't likely to get there if we are operating from the dominant worldview that only intentionally mean people can participate in racism. Here is what I know. I am racist. I am racist because the culture of racial socialization that privileges white people made me this way. I'm not alone. Every white person was raised racist. We participate in racist systems and we benefit from them. We didn't choose it, but we have it anyway. My white fragility gets in the way even now. I often center my own feelings, say to myself, but my intention was good even if it caused harm. I still sometimes want that pat on the back for being a good ally. And I still sometimes neglect to speak up when I hear another white person say or do something that centers their intent over the impact of their words or actions. And none of this makes me a bad or mean person, because it's not about me as an individual. I am, we are each products of our culture. What it makes us is imperfect. But aren't we all? Unlike the story of Pentecost, one doesn't wake up one morning and say, today I am fluent in a new language. Instead, it is a journey, and even the most experienced learner makes mistakes. Our progress as white people, learning to be anti-racist, is the same should we choose that path. We will never be perfect. We will continue to make mistakes, but to adopt a posture of humility, to say, thank you, I understand, I will do better next time. This is to participate in the revolution. May it be so.
Extinguish our chalice flame, but never the fire of justice, of commitment, and of community.
The closing words come from the First Universalist Congregation of Minneapolis. All that we do is for today. All that we do is for times we shall never see. So let us be about the work, for the materials are very precious and they are very perishable. Shalom,
Salam.
namaste,
Blessed be.
amen, stay well.